Sourdough bread and AI. What do they have in common?
Engaging creativity.
Okay, both begin with something small that keeps growing, learning, and evolving. A sourdough starter can be 100 years old, taking in new flour and water each time, growing into something new. AI does the same with creative work, but while everybody loves the smell of fresh bread, we're a little less comfortable with AI taking our creativity without clear boundaries. I mean, at least Japan gives you the rules you can understand. Everyone else is sort of sitting on the sidelines waiting for the courts to figure it out. Hey, I'm Declan Dunn, and this is the AI Optimist. The battle for creative work, it's not techs versus artists. It's about whether we both value the starter and what grows from it. Like sourdough requires regular feeding, AI needs continuous training data with fresh data, not just now, but 100 years from now. In a future that's not going to be like the Wild West AI of the past few years. And that's why the UK's Make It Fair campaign, launched this week, was another voice shouting the same thing. Creative industries in many countries are fighting back against rules that let AI use copyrighted work without permission or payment, and often without involvement of anyone who owns the content. They're not anti-tech, they're pro-creator, demanding the obvious: consent and compensation. See, bakers, well, most of them, openly share their starters as gifts. AI companies in many countries took creative work without asking. We're not saying stop, we're just saying think before you act. Because this battle between creators and AI isn't just playing out in studios and these corporate boardrooms between lawyers. It's at the international level. And two countries are taking completely different approaches to the same problem. Now, if we go to Japan, what's interesting is all copyrightable data is allowed to be put into AI. And I'm using big general terms. They have rules, boundaries, and practices that make this work a little bit better. So in Japan, it's just considered generally that you can take it. But if that impacts, like big companies, Ultraman, I imagine, might not allow that. It's allowed to go in, but if somebody put out an Ultraman image, I'm pretty sure the Japanese courts would do the same thing the Chinese courts did. But by not preventing it, they're not encouraging people to do this. They're encouraging the learning, the training, because their approach to AI is what's called a community approach. That this is an evolution approach to creativity. That what somebody creates and somebody creates years later, all along the line, that's a timeline and evolution back to the idea and how it's iterated. It's almost like a software development. Now, no one's saying if you got your copyright taken, you have materials that were taken in Japan, you have ways to go to court. But even if you don't have lawyers, they have a mediation and arbitration, which isn't perfect, but allows somebody to get their case out there. So there is protection. It's not like they're saying to creators, go away, just do this. And then in episode 81, I talked to you about probably the biggest case yet found against fair use. Thomson Reuters, who owns the Westlaw legal service, had a lawsuit against Ross Intelligence. Ross Intelligence had bought from a third party, all legal, all good, data that was sold to the third party by Westlaw. But see, Ross Intelligence had asked Westlaw to license some of their content, and they said no because they were a competitor. So Ross went to this third party, bought some of these things, put it in and trained their data. It was nothing like major, but 25,000 or so, what are called end notes, sort of like cliff notes, head notes on the top of this lawsuit that gives good and bad arguments. So they weren't allowed to do it. And the judge found that that content was copyrightable. But check this out. It's in there, right? Because the lawsuit wouldn't come up unless Westlaw was able to find it. And the judge found that it was copyrightable enough from Westlaw because a lot of this is very formulaic legal information but it definitely was human influenced. So he found in favor of them. And now Ross Intelligence has to take the content out of their AI, which some people say in a black box is impossible. They have to make sure it's out of there and removed quickly, or at least timely. Now, why does this matter? This is even bigger than just finding content in AI. Many of the large language models buy their content from companies, nonprofit, like Common Crawl, who did this for years. Back in 2010 to about 2020, buying data of all sorts just started growing and growing and growing, driven by what most people in AI know AI to be machine learning before we all called it AI. So the machine learning was buying this kind of data. So third party purchases were okay. There's even been cases of the US government's intelligence buying through third parties because it was illegal to gather the data themselves, for real. So if you can buy from a third party, that's a common way. But just then, Ross did nothing illegal, but they were forced to take down content because of a copyright violation. If I could ask mythologist Joseph Campbell about this, I know he would say that this is an example of our shadow self, taking those feelings we have, the insecurities, the anxieties, the things that we want to project onto others, projected onto AI, just like you projected onto a fictional character, the vampire, who, after all, some people call themselves vampires. There's a whole lifestyle around vampires. All of this evolving from three people sitting around a room and creating horror stories back in 1816. That's why creators are so concerned with legacy, because if they don't have compensation for creating the stories like Dr. Polidori, then why create the story? You can't make a living at it. You're not a writer. You're just going to be regurgitating what other people have done in AI. That's the argument against AI data, is it's what we've already done, and it's just giving us back more of what we've already done. And so, like Campbell would say, what makes AI so scary to us? Not the alien intelligence idea that we can't understand it. It's the fact that AI, like vampires, actually plays two roles that Campbell talks about human myths being built around. The famous one is the hero journey, right? Overcoming odds, going through things, change, bringing about a whole new world. AI represents that all over the place for the people who like it. AI represents the opposite for the people whose creativity was taken because they see it as a destroyer, not a builder of worlds. And AI, in Campbell's words, is also the threshold guardian. That's the guard at the door that watches out for us, that protects us. That's our survival instinct as human beings. From hunter gatherers up to now, we used to paint these projections onto cave walls. Now we put them in AI without permission, and we're trying to put more stories out.
Engaging creativity.
Now, the Creator Control Toolkit is really a way for you to grab back the creations and the ownership and saying what's going on. I'm going to talk about the 3C's in just a second. But if you're starting out as a creator, number one, whatever you created, get a time or date stamp for it that's official. That's why, like with CredTent and these other sites, when you register, you can get a certificate maybe, or it's going to have something noted. In the blockchain, you can create a record that can be updated. You can create a smart contract for licensing. I know that's way beyond most of us, but there's sites you can log into that will pretty much do this for you, and you point and click. So there's really no reason to feel left behind, and there's no reason not to take control or complain about AI anymore. If you're complaining in a year, you just haven't looked at the tools, because a lot of these can do things for free as well. Now listen, it's easy to find a reason things won't work, but finding a reason they will begins with protection and understanding the assets you have as a creator. Because if you don't copyright things, somebody else can take that, copyright it, and you may never even be able to get it back. It's supposed to be able to protect you and create a way that you can actually get compensated if people like it, if you become sort of popular. So the thing I want to remind you about is, first, bare bones, time or date stamp for your creative work. The second thing you need is somewhere to back you up and protect you from do not training. Now, I've set up my websites, and you can set up a little file, Geek Talk robots.txt, which is a search engine thing to block Google or block other search engines. It allows you to do that to block ChatGPT and some of the others, but a lot of them, the large language models ignore it and keep on scraping. So while it's not a great idea, it's not a bad idea to have it. Number two, where's your copyright notice and protection? You have to have it on your site. And included in that has to be AI training. Look at your privacy policy, terms and services. AI training has to be dealt with and write that out. I've got an example on my post on Substack for you. You're welcome to use it. I got it from ChatGPT. It's that easy. A no AI training. Do you allow any AI training or none? Do you allow some with a license? Then you include that we license it, right? So you're taking control there. You're making a statement, even if right now it might not matter. It will, because you have a time and a date when it began. And this AI is going to get way better as time passes. You'll be protected from the very beginning. So look at that. Make sure you have the language in there. And then remember, there's strength in numbers. I was really excited when Penguin Publishing talked about putting its authors together and using AI training with all of the great publishers and using AI training with all the great writers they have. I could see Cred10 doing with all the creatives that they use and work with, that collectively, if there's 1,000, 10,000, a million of you, then you could actually sell this off. But you have to look at what you would actually get paid, whether it's worth your while, because once you train AI, you can't turn it back, even though possibly you can after this episode, but don't think of it that way. And if you don't do anything with it and it trains on it and you haven't given permission, you haven't done anything, what's your defense? Establish your presence before those regulations start adding up. And remember, the 3 C's for creators that we're talking about: control, consent, and compensation. Control, number 1. Up until now, and in the past year, you really have had no control on the internet and social media with your creative materials. People can take them, sample them. It's amazing. Control, consent, and compensation are the 3 C's. You need to control it. You need to give consent. There are some services that are going to write it off for you and say you're giving them consent. Be careful, or at least know what you're getting paid for, because when you get lumped in, there's always high performers and low performers. Which one will you be in terms of compensation, the final C? They say you can't get out stuff. It's only a roulette wheel. Yeah, if you let it be random, but maybe AI gives us an ability to control the roulette.
Engaging creativity.
You know, AI has a lot in common with sourdough bread. Sourdough bread, if you don't know, has a starter, and that starter can be over 100 years old. Each time it's added more and more, and it keeps growing and learning and evolving. AI is a little like that. But while we all like sourdough bread and at least the smell of it, we don't like what AI is doing because we can't see it, taste it, feel it, touch it, and we're told that the content is gone. But the way we did it was such a slap in the face. The thing I like about Japan's model is they stated it, they put it out there, and I'm still looking at it. I'm no lawyer and I'm not giving you legal advice, but they sure took an interesting and intelligent approach that protects AI and protects creators. And that is what I want to do with you this year. I think both sides are working towards the same thing and should work together. And that's what I need your help with. See, this isn't about stopping AI. This is about making clear boundaries when AI is taking things, when AI is replicating, and when AI is intended to replace people. Because the one thing with AI that Japan noticed was it's not supposed to be directed towards just AI, it's the community. But if you hurt an individual, you hurt the community. That's something that's missing in the Valley, and sure, we can all make up on it, but what's more important is what goes in is what comes out. Garbage in, garbage out. A relationship with your community in, a relationship with your community is what will come out. How can we find that copyright middle ground where creators and engineers can work together? And the best ones tend to put the creative with the engineers. Creators bring a view you don't see. You want to talk about edge cases? That's who they are. Engineers bring the structure, the coding, the logic, everything. But together, really smart software companies have always used their users as a major source of growth. And I don't think AI will be any different. So they sort of need creators, whether they want to admit it or not. And how can you? Because if you did, you just open the floodgates to a bunch of lawsuits and paying everyone whose content is in AI, which is like everyone who's created content on social or the internet, right? What happens when one country says, open it all up, while the other says, no copyright materials allowed until we figure it out? One says take it all and the other says not so fast. So the take it all is in Japan and they're moving forward, taking copyrightable content, but with a list of rules that actually make it a little easier to figure out than the US, who says right now nothing generative AI is copyrightable, and putting content into AI, we don't know, we're figuring it out. That is the absolute crux of what this whole business depends on. So yeah, it's not going to go away. But what can you actually do? What road should we take? Because this paradox between countries, think about this. As we grow, we keep thinking in the US and in other countries that this is our big ChatGPT, our large language model. So we all think that we have these large language models, the ChatGPTs, in our country. We have DeepSeek in China and others. We have ChatGPT, Claude, and a bunch of others, open source with Llama, all sorts of choices. In Japan, they have their own AI model for copyright that says, yes, bring it in because we're learning, we're training. The community needs to learn so that the individuals are served as long as the individual rights are not hurt. So right now you can open an AI in Japan and take in any copyrightable content and don't feel like you're doing anything dangerous as long as your intention is to train and to learn. So in a way, that's the engineer's paradise. That's the scenario I see US engineers talking about. Keep it open, do not charge for copyrighted content. Though that's so wrong because they're already making deals with the New York Times. Maybe that's still going on, but other people like Axios have brought deals where technology and money were exchanged. Reddit had a deal with Google. All of this contributes to content and they're getting paid. So at a macro level, the bigger players are definitely working it out because they have the lawyers working this like crazy. And they're waiting till the end and all that's figured out before how that impacts us creators. But that's what I want you to help out with copyright in the US and elsewhere this year, because in the US, they're making a big finding about this time next year. This is the year to put your voice out. Do you think that just taking copyrighted content without permission is allowed? How can we set up permission when we need billions and billions of pictures and documents and text? This is not like a retail store. The volume is so loud. But how do we also encourage that creativity to happen? Because one thing you see with Japan's models is, yes, we stand up for AI and its copyright to be able to use copyrighted materials to get smart. And yes, we stand up for people who own the IP, the content, the copyright, and we're smart enough to do this on a case-by-case basis and figure it out. And I think that's where the US is heading, just moving a little bit slower. And we're saying no, but we can't stop this thing. It's out of the station. So what's my takeaway on this? I don't want us to turn all Japan, but I'm sure keeping an eye on it. And a lot of what the engineers have said made sense to me. If you put these models out, they can get smarter. They can do things for us. And I don't mean the whole eliminate people routine. I mean doing things that aren't worthy of our time in one sense, but even more importantly, aren't things that allow us to do what we need to do in our jobs, in our careers, in our lives. Whew. Until next time.